Good afternoon, good morning. Thank you again for everyone joining us today for today's webinar, Investment in the U.S., How to Navigate Your Location Decision in America. Just a few quick items of housekeeping before we get started. As you may have already noticed, everyone is muted upon entry as they join the webinar. And with that, we want to encourage all questions throughout the presentation, so please use the chat feature at the bottom right corner of the screen. We'll also open it up for a Q&A session at the end. But this way we can able to continue with the presentations, and if there are any questions, we want it to be as interactive as possible, so please utilize the chat feature. You can either have those directed to me, and I'm under the Hickey Associates, the host tab. This is David Hickey with Hickey Associates, or for other participants, to Jennifer Kane and Ford Graham. With that, we are also recording the webinar this way following the presentation. If you are interested in having a copy of the webinar, or if you are not able to stay for the entire time, or you know a colleague that was unable to join, we will have that available for distribution. You can feel free to contact me directly. My contact information will be on the screen, as well as Jen and Ford's as well. Will also be available on our various organizational websites, and I do also expect us to tweet it and have it available through our social media soon after the webinar is complete. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. First, I'll introduce Jennifer Kane, who is a commercial counselor for the U.S. Embassy in London, works very closely with SelectUSA and was the SelectUSA team around the world. Also Ford Graham, who is the president of the Council of American States in Europe, also known as CASE, and he's also the International Investment Director for the South Carolina Department of Commerce. And then again, myself, David Hickey, with Hickey Associates. I'm the Senior Director of Europe, based out of our London office in the United Kingdom. So with that, I will pass it over to our first speaker, Jennifer Kane. Thank you again.
Good morning. This is Jen, and thanks to David and Ford for inviting us to participate in this webinar. I hope that we're able to relay some valuable information and indicate some good resources for everyone. I know that not everyone listening is from the UK, but I thought if I give some examples, it'll be UK specific, but I use them to demonstrate a point, because the first thing I want to do is sort of outline or paint a picture of the US-UK bilateral trade and investment relationship. It is one of the largest trade and investment relationships in the world, with trade alone accounting for $214 billion worth of goods and services annually. And along with trade comes investment flows. The U.S.-UK bilateral investment is more than $1 trillion, and that creates about 2 million jobs on each side of the Atlantic. The U.S. and the U.K. are each country's largest single investor, and in fact, in terms of FDI stock or foreign direct investment stock, the UK is about the same amount as the second and third investor nations, Japan and Germany combined. So I do this, I mention these statistics really to impart the fact that even though it can seem rather daunting, and the US is a very large marketplace, as I know Ford will go into in more detail, it's really important to realize that you're not alone in this process. Someone has paved the way. Someone's gone before you. There are plenty of resources out there for companies, including those of us here on the call today. The three of us are all quite anxious to be of support to any investor firms that are interested in the U.S. marketplace. So again, apologies for using the UK as a specific example, but I did want to just show that there is a huge world out there, which means that there are a lot of resources at your disposal, so you don't have to go it alone. So why the United States? It may seem obvious, but in fact, there's a lot of nuances to the U.S. economy that make it an important marketplace for foreign investors to consider. It's continually ranked high on various indices. First ranked nation on A.T. Kearney's FDI Confidence Index, and that's year on year, including 2014. It's also ranked first in the Venture Capital and Private Equity Attractiveness Index, which has been going for 5 years now, and that's also the U.S. has been ranked first in that index. The World Bank's Ease of Doing Business Index, again, the U.S. is ranked number 7, but that's out of 189 nation states. And important to note that it is ranked higher than some countries, including UK, Finland, Sweden, and Ireland. So the 7th ranking is still quite impressive. So why does it rank so high, and why is it such an important place for companies to consider expanding and investing in? Of course, you've got the 320 million strong consumer market ready to buy. There's a very strong R&D base, a strong intellectual property protection system in place, which of course goes hand in hand with a transparent legal system. Highly developed infrastructure, which includes access to your supply chains. And what's really setting things apart these days, as everybody's heard, are the low energy costs, which have declined significantly in recent years. Using the U.S. as an export base is an important strategy for companies to consider. More than 20% of U.S. goods exports are actually by U.S. subsidiaries of foreign-owned firms. So that's a significant piece of the export pie. And actually what we're hearing is the most important factor for investor firms when considering the U.S. is the American workforce. It's a very talented, skilled, innovative workforce. It always ranks high in productivity scales, and it's actually quite cost-effective. So this is the number one reason that investors are looking at the U.S. these days is the labor force. So when considering what your strategy for how to enter the U.S., or if you're still debating whether or not to look at the U.S., as I mentioned, there are many resources that are available to you. SelectUSA is the U.S. federal program dedicated to helping foreign investors look at the U.S. marketplace and help them to make their investment a reality. So it's really a program that's about the specific companies looking at the marketplace. And our goal is to really help each investor firm one-on-one with counseling or directing people to resources, identifying different federal programs and services that might be at your disposal. So really to help pave the way and make things as easy and streamlined as possible for an investor company. SelectUSA does have representatives around the world, around Europe, and of course in Washington, D.C., to work with companies one-on-one. And again, it's a question of helping you to navigate federal rules or regulations, learn about different incentives that might be available, help to understand any visa requirements, and also, of course, connect investor firms with other partners or service providers that might be important for you to know, such as people like Ford Graham, who's going to speak shortly, and other economic development organizations at the state, the city, or the county level in the United States. SelectUSA also provides an ombudsman role, and this is really about helping an investor firm to navigate the federal government. So if there's a situation that's specific to your company and you're not clear on how to adhere to certain rules or regulations, then we're here at your disposal to help you understand that so you can be compliant. The SelectUSA website, which I have here at the top, selectusa.gov, is actually contains a wealth of information. I highly recommend that companies look at this website as it's a fantastic resource. It offers a searchable guide based on the criteria that you want to use of different federal programs. It offers industry snapshots of different industries within the U.S. It has an interactive map of the United States with links to various incentives and incentive programs, and various other tools that might help you in determining where in the U.S. you might want to go. And there's also, of course, an FAQ page. There's other resources that have been developed by the private sector, various law firms or consulting firms. With their permission, we have posted all of that there. So there's a good resource available for you. And the link that's on the bottom of this slide also is to the SelectUSA investment report, so it gives a good snapshot of the United States. Specifically, SelectUSA is in March of 2015, so just a few, 4 months away, is going to host in Washington, D.C., its second investment summit. The first investment summit took place 1 year ago and was so successful it was a sold-out crowd of about 1,300 people that for the March 2015 event, they have doubled the number of attendees and found a larger venue. So we're anticipating 2,600 people to participate. And it was so successful the first time around because it's really about meeting the entire United States in one place. So as an investor firm or as an economic development organization interested in attending the event, there'll be, of course, serious amounts of networking going on, 2 days worth of conference and conference panels and breakaway sessions on how to do business in the United States. There'll be, for investor firms, you will receive a one-on-one schedule of appointments that's at your discretion with whom you'd like to meet with while you're there, because there will be economic development organizations from states and cities across the United States in attendance. You'll be able to learn from other companies that have gone before you. There'll be case studies presented. And so registration just opened up last week. And so if it's something, investing in the U.S. is something that you're seriously considering, this might be a good event for you to attend so that you can get to know the people whom you might want to be working with. And again, I just, in closing, to allow time for Ford and David, I just did want to say that I'm here. Please feel free to email me, jennifer.kane@trade.gov, if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer questions for UK or European entities. I'm happy to introduce you to my counterparts in your countries. So please feel free to reach out to me, and we can start a discussion as soon as you'd like. So thanks very much.
All right. Thank you, Jen. Very well done. Let's now, I'll pass it over to our next presenter, and Ford Graham. Ford, please take it.
I'm here. Can everyone hear me? I guess so. It looks like we can. This is Ford Graham. I'm calling from Munich. I represent the Council of American States in Europe, and I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of the way that we support companies and how you can get in touch with us, and some general information about site selection in the United States, and then I'll pass it back to David and his team to finish up the presentation. This will be by far the most boring part of the 1 hour presentation, so grab some coffee, and hopefully I can make something, tell you something interesting that you'll laugh at or that you'll remember. So let's get started. I like this slide. It sort of shows the European view of the world. And if you'll notice, this is sort of the standard map that's in European textbooks for kids on this side of the earth, let's say. And if you'll see, Europe is in the middle. So I want to juxtapose that against this slide and see what's in the middle. It's the American view of the world, and this is the type of map that I saw in textbooks growing up. And it sort of shows the different perspective, let's say, and ways in which we look at the world and look at ourselves. And the third one is the Australian view of the world, and I just want to point out that this is wrong and not even in line with the other two. But anyway, I like this next slide because it sort of gives you an idea of the United States and its vastness. There are 140 million wage earners in the U.S. and over 300 million people. So lots of consumers, lots of territory to cover, and this map sort of shows you where a good concentration of the population is, but it does spread out from one coast to the other, and it's quite large, but it's definitely able to you're definitely able to handle it with a little help. And one interesting thing is that European direct investment constitutes about 70% 70%, 70 of all FDI into the United States. So again, just from a very, very high-level overview, 30,000 feet, I want to take this map of Europe and I've superimposed it on the United States to show you how large it is in comparison. We have, on the continental United States, roughly 4 time zones. So the closest one to Europe is obviously the East Coast, and that's a 6-hour time difference. Then you gain an hour as you travel west. Alaska and Hawaii have their own time zones as well. So again, just something to think about when you're managing your operations and when you're trying to conquer part of the United States or all of the United States. And because we're such a large country geographically and in terms of our population, there are regional markets that have developed. So essentially what sells well on the Pacific Coast may not be something that sells well in New England, for example, or what's very popular in Texas may not be as in demand as the South Atlantic side. So my advice to companies often who are starting in the United States for the first time is to really focus on a region, focus on a location where you already have existing customers or where you think your product will sell the best, and not try to go after the entire U.S. market all at once. And then in terms of finding the right place for your facility or your warehouse or your sales office, I've got this interesting map for you to see. There are over 3,000 different municipal jurisdictions or counties or parishes, as we call them. And each one has its own nuances of incentives and taxes and the way that its business environment, let's say. But it is manageable. It looks challenging on paper, but it is manageable. And that's one of the reasons that professionals like those involved with CASE and those involved with SelectUSA and groups like Hickey Associates are able to help you bridge that information gap between your current operations and starting an operation in the United States. So who is CASE and what is CASE? Basically, CASE is the Council of American States in Europe. It was founded in 1971, and it represents those 16 U.S. states with offices located throughout Europe. The organization's been around for over 40 years, and our members have been, some of them have been involved since the beginning, or nearly the beginning, and have a significant amount of experience helping European companies find the right location for their operations in the United States. And our mission, really, our core mission of not only CASE but all of the states that are involved with our organization is to provide as much information and support as we can to European investors so that they can make the right decision. So they'll be happy years down the road with the decision that they made, and so they'll continue to invest and grow in that particular location that they've found in the United States. CASE is all state-funded. It's all funded by the different states, and those organizations are funded by their local state governments. So all of our assistance is free of charge. But now free doesn't mean it's not necessarily worth valuable. It's just we've all been charged by our different state entities to create jobs and create investment in our different jurisdictions. And so that's our goal, to be as helpful as we possibly can. There's an adage that says that we're with the government, we're here to help, and people laugh at that. But we truly are dedicated to helping you make the right decision. So CASE is made up of, like I said before, those 16 different states that have representation excuse me, throughout or in Europe. And I just want to run through the list for those of you who are not necessarily watching at home. And sorry to bore you with the reading of the list, but it's Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Mississippi, Missouri, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Utah, Virginia, and West Virginia. And so the next slide I want to point out is is offices in Europe. I mentioned these 16 states have a presence somewhere in Europe, but some of the states have multiple locations. Florida, for example, has an office in Germany, an office in the UK, an office in France. Georgia has a representative in Germany and as well as in the UK. And if you look at this map, you can sort of see where everyone is located. But my advice to you, if you're located outside of one of these jurisdictions, is to just give a call to the state or give a call to the local contact that you'll see when you go to the case website, and they'll be able to direct you to the right person. Again, the reason you might ask, why are there only 16 states? And my response to you is that these are the 16 states that have decided that it's worth their energy, worth their time to invest the money to have a representative or multiple representatives in Europe. And the idea behind that is that they're in your time zone or closer to you, and they can answer your questions about whatever sort of business inquiries you may have. So I'd like to go over sort of the services that CASE has. And CASE really is more of a trade organization. So all of the support that we offer is really through our member states. And some of those services include identification of the most suitable investment opportunities for European investors. We provide assistance with the site selection process. And that means finding the right office space or finding the right manufacturing space or warehousing space within our different jurisdictions. We obviously will talk about, we help link you to local and state incentives, and those incentives are typically based on job creation and investment. And we also connect you to the local networks in our individual states. So whether it be banks that are operating locally, or whether it be attorneys that have experience with international companies and understand the legal jurisdiction of the particular state that they're in, or maybe it's an accountant that has experience both in U.S. law and in international tax law. Again, trying to make the process as easy on you as possible, and I'll say that I know 1,000 times today in the discussion. We also will provide interesting information on your particular industry sector. Who else is operating in the particular state that is doing something similar to what you're doing? Also, what are the particular operating costs? What are the labor rates? What are the lease rates in the area? What are the power rates in the area? All those different factors that go into making a well-informed decision about the right location for you. We'll also talk when we have a discussion about what are the workforce and technical training programs that exist. Certain states offer a rebate on the costs you've incurred to train people. Other states offer the training to you at no cost to the company. Just different ways of getting to the same end goal, which is having a trained workforce ready when you open your doors on day one. And I mentioned some of the administrative and legal support. Again, trying to make those connections for you that are so difficult to do from afar, or so difficult to do when you don't have a working knowledge of the particular jurisdiction that you're looking at. I hope everyone's still awake. There are lots of different ways that we find that companies enter into the market for the first time. One is that we hear typically is the use of an agent or distributor, where a company has already selling the products and they're doing sales in the United States through an agent who may be selling other products as well, complementary products to whatever you're trying to sell. Another one that we often get is obviously the joint venture and strategic alliances. Some states are able to provide those ideas on where to do a strategic partnership or where to do a joint venture. Other states are sort of limited by the political nature of providing joint ventures. And that goes the same with acquisitions. It really just depends on the state and the jurisdiction. But in most cases, like I mentioned before, states can provide a list of the types of companies that are doing what you're trying to accomplish, or that could be doing something similar to or complementary to what you're trying to accomplish. And then the other way that companies obviously come into the United States is that they want to set up a facility, whether it be a sales office or a warehouse, or some sort of manufacturing or assembly. And generally, you know, once you make that first step, we do see a typical transition period, a typical 1, 2, 3 process. It usually starts with some sort of small subsidiary or a sales office, especially if you don't have a large volume of sales already in the U.S. And then once you start making the sales, once your product is coming on a more regular basis into the U.S., you obviously expand to a warehousing facility where you can deliver those goods and keep them better organized and are not waiting for them to come across the pond, so to speak. And you've got that warehousing to be able to stage them. And then eventually, because of the cost of doing business in the U.S. as compared to typically compared to a European jurisdiction, again, depending on what place you're looking at in the U.S., the next step would be doing some sort of light assembly or some manufacturing in the United States to be closer to your customers. So one of the interesting things that I mentioned before is that this is sort of our goal, is to help you find the right business location. And some of the things that you need to think about when you're trying to determine what would be the best fit for you, where in the United States would be the ideal location to start your efforts or to expand your existing efforts, would be, you know, what is the proximity to existing markets? I mean, do you have sales in the Southwest, and is that really where the bulk of your sales are from? Would that be a good location for you to be in as a result, because you've already got a good solid base there? It may be a great place for you to start. Are your sales all in the northeastern side of the United States? Maybe you want to focus on conquering the East Coast first. What about labor cost? Is a very high number of employees that you'll have? Or is it mainly machinery? You know, is low labor cost driving your project, or is it a skilled labor force that's driving your project? And then, what's the appropriate workforce? Do you need to find people who have worked for years or decades in what you're doing, or is it something that can be transferred from a different type of industry to yours? Are they skills that are easily transferable? Are you interested in being near companies, other UK companies or other companies from other parts of Europe where you're from? Is that something that's important to you? Do you want to be in an industrial center, an industrial hub, or are you okay being a little further out in more of a rural area? I mean, all of the services will be there. You'll have water and electricity and all of those key things. But is that as advantageous to you as being in a industrial core? Obviously, the closer you are typically to an industrial core, the more expensive the property will be, as an example. What's the tax environment? Or certain states have certain ways that they tax different industries, and so that's another thing that you need to take a look at, is what's the most appropriate tax environment for the type of services that you provide, or the type of product you provide, or the type of facility that you're looking to establish. What about an international airport? Do you have to have direct flights between where you live and the United States and not have to fly again? Obviously, that will limit you on the number of airports that are available and the proximity to the jurisdiction. Most states have multiple regional airports as well. So again, how important is being very, very close to an international airport? And of course, incentives and financial support are often very important, and states differ greatly in terms of the financial support that they provide, and they differ greatly depending on the types of industries. So that could be a huge factor in determining where you want to be. I will say that despite all the incentives that are thrown at you, and all the financial support that's thrown at you, eventually incentives will go away. And incentives never make a bad site good. So the focus should be finding the best location that makes the most sense for you from a business standpoint, and then having incentives be the icing on the cake. I will tell you that sort of the worst conversation to start with an economic developer at a state level or a county level or a municipal level is, I want to find where the incentives are the best, and I don't really care about anything else. That makes them very, very concerned about the longevity of your project. It makes them very, very concerned about how serious you are about establishing a presence in their jurisdiction. And then, of course, the last thing I'll mention is infrastructure and transport routes. Do you need to be near a port? Do you need to be on a major river? Do you need to be next to an interstate? Do you need to be visible from an interstate, or can you be further away? Just like in the UK, just like in other parts of Europe, the closer you are to all of the available services, the closer you are to the transportation hubs, the more expensive typically the property will be. So just something to take into consideration. And so when you have your initial conversation with a state or a regional group, what all of those folks will want to know are the following types of questions. And the first one will always be, what is the potential job creation? And the states differ in terms of how long a time period or how we're looking at. But I would say most are looking to understand what will the job growth in your company be between 3 and 5 years. And on that, typically it's not just how many people you'll have, but also what will the wages be for those individuals that are working at your facility? Will they all be very low-level, low-skill employees? Will they all be high-level engineers? What will that demographic look like, so to speak? And then after the job creation question, they'll like to know what's the investment going to be? I mean, is it just a small office with a handful of computers, or is it multiple millions of dollars worth of machinery and equipment? That's important to the states as well, because a lot of tax base is driven by the value of the machinery and the equipment. Of course, they want to know what's the size of the facility. What are you looking for? Are you looking for a warehouse that's 10,000 square meters or 15,000 square meters, or you want a small office that's 300 square meters, 300 meters squared? What is driving your decision in terms of the size of facility that you might need? Obviously, we'll also want to know whether you want to build something, construct something entirely new, or you want to go into an existing facility that's either unoccupied or that has been built to attract companies. And then I mentioned before when we talked about, or when I mentioned in the last slide about some of the factors that go into your site selection process, they're absolutely going to want to know what's driving your site selection process. Is it proximity to a key port? Is it proximity to an industry hub? Is it proximity to an airport? What are the things that are driving your decision? And I know in the business world it's very competitive, and you're always trying to avoid disclosing too much information because you don't want your competitors to know what you're trying to achieve. But I can tell you that working with economic development organizations on the state level, on the local level, and the regional level, we don't want your competition to know what you're doing either. We want us to keep it as quiet as possible. And so in some cases, states are willing to sign, and other organizations are willing to sign NDAs, and others they're not. But in all senses, it's business confidentiality. We want to protect you. Having said that, the more information that you can provide to us, the better. If you keep everything close to the chest and don't disclose it, it makes our job in helping you find the right location much more difficult. So the more that you can disclose to us, the more quickly and the more succinctly we can get a response to you. And I think I'm running low on time. Other factors to think about: how close you want to be to a university. Is that important to you? Or a technical college? I mentioned a little bit before about rural versus urban. And then, of course, relocation of key European staff. Are you sending lots of people? What will the quality of life be in the place that you're sending them? Things to think about. And goodness, there's a whole bunch of information on the site selection process, but basically what will happen is once you do an initial inquiry and explain sort of what you're looking for in terms of a location, the state will follow up with you, or the regional group will follow up with you, and they'll have a conversation with you via email or via video conference, or maybe they'll fly in because they're in Europe. They'll fly in close because they're close to you, and sit down and have a one-on-one conversation with you about your needs and about what they can potentially provide in terms of support. It's a process, and it can take anywhere from 6 months to, I just had a project that lasted for 7 years. So it's a process, and again, we're trying to make it as painless on you as possible. And I guess the key understanding here of the benefits that the organizations that are members of CASE provide is that they're individually tailored information packages specific to what your questions are, what your industry is, and what you're looking for. And as I mentioned before, all of these services are free. They're all confidential. And of course, you can in the end say you're happy with the information, but you're no longer going to pursue the project, and that's absolutely fine. There's no obligation. And all of our folks are located in Europe, so they're in your time zone, and they've been doing this for years, so they understand the nuances of European companies going into the United States and some of the questions that you have thought about and some of the questions that you may not have thought about yet, and they can help you determine the answer to. And again, our role is to help you find the right location and the softest landing possible in the United States. And on that, I will just pitch our website. It's www.investinusa.org, and it has information on the individual states that are members of CASE. It also has information on how to get in touch with them. So thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, SelectUSA, for participating with us. Thank you, David and Hickey Associates for allowing us to participate as well. And I'll be quiet.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Ford. That was very informative. Truly appreciate your participation and everything there before. And there'll be some questions here at the end directed right back to you and your organization. And now moving forward, just for a few minutes, let me cover actually in a little more detail some of the topics and issues that both Jen and Ford pointed out. Just a little background on our organization before I get started. We are a full-service global site selection and public incentive consulting and management firm. We've been in the business for nearly 30 years. As you can see there on the screen, we have 13 offices across the U.S. We do a number of different service offerings for our clients. We really specialize in site selection, labor analytics, and securing management and administration of public incentives. I'm located in our London office. We also have an office in Berlin, as well as other strategic capabilities throughout Europe as well. Truly, as in looking in today's world, business can go anywhere. There are a number of issues that Ford just presented of what drives many of those decisions. But really, the first and foremost opportunity is that you can go anywhere. There is that opportunity. Really, it just depends on what is the market you're trying to get to, who is the customers, where does it work within your own supply chain and logistics for your company. So there are a number of aspects and criteria, and Ford covered a number of these already, but workforce availability, market growth potential, customer proximity, what is the infrastructure, the supply chain and logistics that make the business work, the overall business climate, the taxes, the regulatory environment, and in particular the map that Ford showed with all of the different county jurisdictions and the thousands and thousands, and understand how each one has their own liability and their own regulations to make sure that you understand what works best for your business. Also the quality of life, something that can be difficult to quantify in some of the major and the empirical type of site location analysis that we work with our clients on a daily basis. It can be very difficult. However, it has been done, and it is done to determine where's the best place for your company, for the culture of your company, and for your employees, not just those employees that might be coming over from Europe for that initial startup, but those for the future as well. The cost of energy, one of the true bright spots of investing in the U.S. and opportunities going forward, always that cost of energy and that certainty that is building more and more in that future in the United States. And then finally, the public incentive opportunities. And as mentioned already, public incentive opportunities are not something that should be the main driver. They'll never make a bad location a good location. But it is something that can come in, and especially in that initial startup, that initial investment, to help get you and make that business case and make it work. And then also public incentive opportunities doesn't necessarily have to mean just cash grants up front or tax credits, but it could also mean training grants and training assistance and things like recruitment support. And we'll go into a few of those before going further. But not to belabor on this, but just this is the similar location analysis methodology that we use at Hickey Associates. And to show this is to just understand that first, you need to start with the right planning and the right understanding. And it doesn't have to be overwhelming. It doesn't have to be all of that entire list that we just talked through in the details, but really understanding what are the key criteria for your decision and going forward, how to weight that. What is the most important aspects? Where does quality of life come in versus the taxes and regulatory environment? But really finding within that, not only your project, your company, but that specific project as well, and discover which of those key criteria make the most sense for you. Then starting at, higher, doing a macro analysis, not just first determining which are the best sites, but really eliminating those that won't work for you. If it's a large advanced manufacturing, Midtown Manhattan might not be the best location for you. For example, that could present other opportunities and for other businesses. They're really narrowing it down to, for some of the microsite analysis and really looking at the ground level. And we encourage all of our clients to do site visits, to go down to the level, not just to see the site or the facility itself, but to also meet the community, meet the leaders, meet the folks that Ford just spoke about, and the economic developers and the case members themselves, to understand and really get the feel, is this a community that I want to be a part of and I want to support for the long run, and also meet local employers as well. So you're not a competitor, or it actually could be a competitor, but who else is out there to get a more fair and balanced understanding of what the community is like, what are the employees, what are some of the challenges that might exist. And then really going in and understanding finally when you narrow it down to the last 1, 2, or 3 sites, going to some negotiation and really understanding too how those incentives and what those incentives might be going forward. And really look at this, and that is a 3-dimensional type of approach. Understanding what are the financial, what are some of the costs that are in place, the taxes, for example, the energy costs, but then also the non-financial. What are the quality of life type of opportunities, just as one example, and then also to analyze the risk that is in place and it might be in place going forward. So just to narrow onto some of those individual issues, more and more, and as Jen mentioned, the skill lever, and many of the opportunities that the U.S. presents today. It's still one of the most productive workforces in the world. But what's most important is not to just look at, when you are doing a site location analysis, not just looking at, okay, well, I know there's this large of a labor pool, so we could definitely find the employees within there. Or we know there's so many of this type of job that exists by looking at Bureau of Labor Statistics data, for example, from the federal government. That did work, but today to really understand exactly which site works best, it's best to do some additional analytics and to understand, not only what some of the costs are, but to make sure those skill sets are there. Those skill sets are not just there today, but will be there in 2 years, in 3 years, in 5 years, and even further out. And that can be done today by looking at different growth patterns, different migratory patterns, saturation rates. So what is the direct competition for that labor that you're going for, those skill sets? And then also if there are any complementary skill sets and what else might be out there as well in that competition set. But one thing we never do is if you do the full analysis and you realize that in a couple of locations, perhaps there's one skill set that's not quite meeting, but everything else on the analysis is coming through and the infrastructure is right, the costs are right, the energy, the reliability, the demand, everything is right, but there's this one skill set. We don't eliminate that community. Instead, we go to the community leaders, we go to the academic institutions, and ask, what kind of training opportunities might be there, what type of curriculum development, talent pipeline, things like that, to be able to help develop that in the future, which is certainly a win-win not only for the business, to have more confidence in the employees of the future, but also then for the local government, local community to develop their skill set. And then just looking at, going back to cost itself, here's a concept to show actually how important and how critical the labor cost aspect can be in the overall site cost decision. As aforementioned, infrastructure requirements and identifying exactly what works, what you need for your business. And this can be proximity to the modes of transportation. Do you need a highway exchange? Is that most important? Is it a commercial airport? Is it seaports, a freight rail? Do you need a connection to that rail, and where do you need to be able to go from there? What are the distances that will work for the time of your business, for the logistics, for the customer proximity? Also looking at the energy, different energy sources, reliabilities. What is the peak demand and cost? That varies significantly from region to region throughout the U.S. and understanding exactly what is best, what is needed for your business, as well as on the communication side. What kind of broadband reliability do you need? What is the dependability? What are the climatic conditions that could affect that and those communications going forward? And again, from region to region, state to state, community to community, that can vary quite often. Also, the concept of supply chain and industry clusters. Is this something that you need to enter the existing supply chain? And to look at those standing industry clusters as there are operational advantages that are already in place. And further on the taxes and regulatory environment, understand the tax liabilities of each jurisdiction and how those tax liabilities specifically relate to your business and your business going forward, as state and local taxes may vary greatly in what that direct impact is on your company. What type of business, what is the industry, and what might you be selling, creating going forward. Also regulations, the regulatory environment from state to state can be very different. This can be in the workplace laws, environmental laws, also ordinances at the very lowest local levels as well. It's important to understand what is your business and how could these challenges be in the future. So really, in doing the site location strategy, the desired location is to prove which is the best location, utilizing data results, and making sure that everyone on the team, everyone that's involved in that decision, understands exactly what is the decision, is confident in that, and again, it's based on sound data, and that it ensures valuable money is saved and the future is built for success. Going into public incentives, we're running low on time here. I want to open it for some questions and answer session, but just public incentives, there are cash opportunities, and could be real savings and lower the cost of money. Some of this impact can reduce your capital outlays, provide additional financial resources to reinvest back in the business, at that outset or even further down in the long run. Enhance ROI, also significant startup cost reductions, which might be the most difficult part going forward. A few things especially different than what you might be used to in Europe. There is no federal oversight. Most of the incentives are delivered at the state and local levels. So as you find within Europe, it is not so regulated by the European Commission. As is there, this is a very competitive environment, the state versus state, and even community versus community once you get within that state. A couple items going forward that are becoming more and more prevalent, the concept of the but-for, that many states will require that in order to receive an incentive, you have to certify that but-for. Without that particular incentive, those jobs would not be okay, that investment would not be made, making that incentive critical, and that often that there was some sort of competition that led for that need for that incentive, that they were considering interstate between multiple states were under specific consideration. And more you're seeing states actually, requiring companies to sign an affidavit that citing that there was that condition. Also, further transparency and return on investment is required and being required in showing the taxpayer, are they getting their return on investment for these incentives, and more tracking and compliance being required. Laboring just a few examples of some of the competition and the type of advertisements and marketing that is put out there. Some of the types of incentives that are available, a number of different cash opportunities, the grant, forgivable loans, tax credits that can be converted to cash in case you don't have particular liabilities, such as in a second. Also, a term called the deal closing fund. More and more states are having discretionary opportunities, most often run or at the with the governor, and the opportunity to, if there's some final gap financing requirements that might be there, to put that inducement over, then the governor might have the opportunity to parlay those funds. A number of opportunities to lower your liability through property taxes, sales and use, corporate income franchise premiums, as well as impact fees. And opportunities, again, as I mentioned earlier, with understanding your tax liability, this is incredibly important as well, to understand exactly what that value of the incentive that is being offered to you might actually be to your business. If you have full-on corporate income tax exemption, how much corporate income taxes are you actually going to be liable in that jurisdiction, and what is the real savings for that? As I mentioned on the outset, training rent, an incredible opportunity and a real cost that you're going to have to spend in the future. You have opportunities to rebate, to refund, reimburse significant training or trainer wages, on-the-job training opportunities, as well as really helping with curriculum development, supplies, training space, and so on. Also, as you're entering a new location, a new community, you might not be familiar, and with some of the players on the ground and how best to seek employees. Many times these economic developers and the communities will help you with that through recruitment marketing, holding job fairs, and doing application intake, even doing applicant pre-screening. And without them similar to the macro-micro, you're not necessarily eliminating or choosing the best candidates for you, but eliminating those that won't work. A number of complex incentives out there as well, marks tax credits, tax refinancing, industrial revenue bonds, as well as other opportunities, potential for reduced or free land, reduced utility costs, lease cost reductions that can be significant, especially on the bottom line going forward. A number at the local level of waiving permitting costs and expedited process, which can truly save real cost and time, and as well as a number of special opportunity zones. There are also a number of incentives available at the energy, for energy efficiency, and green and renewable energy opportunities. Not to belabor it too much further, but truly is an aspect to understand what the risks and rewards are for each incentive opportunity as critical to term callback. Perhaps if you don't meet your commitments, there might be a penalty down the line or a repay that is required of certain incentives. There's my contact information. We'll have it up here again on the screen. I want to open up the questions in the chat box featured in the bottom right corner of the screen just for the final few moments here. I have a couple questions that have come in, and I will mute Ford and Jen here to answer these questions. But the first one that came through is how to get further information on registration for the SelectUSA Summit. Jen, that's definitely one for you.
Sure. The SelectUSA Summit, the website is selectusasummit.com, and all of the information will be made available as it becomes available. So all developments for speakers and the agenda and different exhibitors and whatnot will be made available as soon as commitments are agreed upon. So it's something to regularly check back to. The registration page, as I mentioned, is live, so people can go in and register as of today, as of last week, in fact. There is a registration fee. It's $550. And that fee, as I mentioned, includes, for investor firms, it includes a schedule of one-on-one appointments with different economic development organizations or service providers so that you can really make the most out of your 2 or 3 days that you're at the event.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Jen. I think the next one for Ford on, there was this slide, and I will pull it up again, on, I think what that question is. To ask you about project numbers and project details. So these can be in ranges, kind of do my narrative here. It can be in ranges and with varying phases. What is the defined information or level that you need to have at a minimum in order to proceed with a project?
In terms of getting a project on the books, it really, unfortunately, it varies from state to state. I think some of the things that I mentioned before in terms of the size, the number of jobs that you think you'll have over a 5-year period, or you can start with a 2 or 3 year period, and the level of investment that you'll have, and obviously more about what you're trying, the type of company you are and what you're trying to do in the United States. But I think it can be very basic at the beginning. If you're looking for a complete incentive package, it's not going to be, we're not going to be able to, no one will be able to produce anything right up front. It would really take some discussion about where in the state you particularly want to be or what jurisdiction you want to particularly be in, and then more about again, like I said before, those key factors that are influencing what that decision, how that decision will be made. So I don't know if there's a key minimum. I would say that probably a brief idea or a general idea of what you're trying to accomplish, and then what would be the job creation and investment around that would be a great way to start the conversation with a state or local economic developer.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And I guess we'll start this back with you again, Ford. So the question is the trends on incentives. I know you made the comment during that, potentially incentives may not exist in the future. What are some of the trends that you see today, and in getting to that ultimate reality?
Okay. Well, again, it's like you mentioned, David. It's not something that's regulated or overseen by the federal government. So there are 50 different ways that our incentives are done across the U.S. So it's hard for me to just generalize. But most incentives will come with a window of from which you can collect incentives, and it really will not only depend on the state, but also the particular type of incentive that's being offered. For example, one may be a program for payroll tax rebates, and that program may last for up to 10 years. And then once it's done, that program would go away for you unless you had a major expansion and qualified for an additional application for that program. So, I mean, it can be as short as 10 years. In some jurisdictions, property tax agreements or reduction in property taxes can last as long as 20, 30, 40 years. So it really depends on the particular state and the particular jurisdiction. And I'm sorry to not give a direct answer, but it's just so vast in the way that incentives are done. It's just so different that it's hard for me to be succinct in my answer to you.
No, absolutely, and as as we work with our clients as well, I mean, they're very unique from location to and state to state. But then even once you get in with this inside the states, community versus community, and you're seeing a lot more of that competition. And county, you could look at one metro area and have multiple counties competing for businesses, all with their own incentive programs that can be very different. One, it could be a tax credit. One could be a cash grant, that are targeted specifically. One could be an abatement tied directly to the property taxes. It's really unique in that you have all these different incentives. And one thing we're seeing as well more and more is not a focus, even too, a lot of this is job creation, but more and more incentives are being based on job retention as well, and providing companies with not just incentives for creating new jobs, but retaining those jobs as well. And then the aspect of transparency and return on investment, it's something as there's more and more focus, and this is critical for businesses to understand as they're making these investments, because it's not just going to, it's not just about is the program being successful, but it's going to also take, a look at, is the company, creating the jobs? Are they meeting the commitments that have come forward? And hopefully as going forward, when it comes to proprietary data, that'll continue to be protected, as you talked about earlier, as Ford talked about with the some of those regulations and NDAs and things like that, and hopefully we'll continue to protect that information. But there will be other, project-related details as far as the company, the jobs, the capital investment that will be out there, and if that's something, that could concern the business going forward, and is that information, and then again, the callbacks as well. And if a company comes in and makes a commitment to jobs, makes a commitment to capital investment, certain wages to pay the employees in those new jobs, and receives an incentive for that, and is unable to meet those commitments, then what is that? What is the callback? If you were, it was a pre-performance incentive, so if that incentive was provided ahead of the actual project work being done, and you don't meet those goals and those commitments, then what is required on the company? Is there a payback? And in some places there could be even an increased interest or consider a penalty on top of that. Well, thank you for all the questions and the participation. We're over the time now that was allotted to this and set forth. So I will go ahead and set the closing out of the webinar. Thank you again for everyone that joined us. Jen and Ford, thank you very much. And as you'll see on the screen now, the email address, contact information for each of the participants and the organizations. I encourage everyone to please, go ahead and use the, all incredible support opportunities that are out there for this incredible, major, significant investment of coming to the U.S. and then exciting the opportunities, and they're greater than they ever have been today. And to utilize, please, these sources, the SelectUSA Summit in March, all the opportunities that are presented by the Council of American States and Europe, and if there's ever an opportunity for our organization, Hickey Associates, to provide support as well. So thank you again for everyone joining us today. We'll have this presentation, if you would like a copy of it, a digital file. We contact any of us directly. We'll also have it available on our organizational websites, and we'll have more information for that following the webinar. So thank you again, and hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the week.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Jennifer.